Good evening, Barberton students and families. We are so glad that you could join us for our Christmas story time. And tonight I'm going to read two books. The first book that I'm going to read is Mr. Willoughby's Christmas Tree by Robert Berry. And both books that I'm going to read are AR testable. I will share the quiz numbers so you can test on these after you hear both of them. I also plan to share the read aloud on YouTube so you can watch and see the pictures up close again if you want to do that after you watch our time for tonight. As I read, I want you to be listening for the theme of the story. Now remember, theme is the message or lesson that the reader can take away from the story. So thinking about Christmas time, Christmas is a time for giving. And at Christmas time, we often hear it's better to give than to receive. And so as we listen to this book, I want you to be thinking about what other theme that you hear that you can take away right here at Christmas time. So Mr. Willoughby's Christmas Tree. And it starts with Mr. Willoughby. Mr. Willoughby's Christmas tree came by special delivery, full and fresh and glistening green, the biggest tree he had ever seen. So Mr. Willoughby's tree is coming up. He's waiting on it. He dashed downstairs to open the door. This was the moment he'd waited for. A magnificent tree, splendid, he cried. Please, sir, won't you carry it right inside? I think it might look best this year, right in the parlor corner here. But once the tree stood in its place, Mr. Willoughby made a terrible face. The tree touched the ceiling, then bent like a bow. Oh, good heavens, he gasped. Something must go. It's too tall. Baxter the butler was called on in haste to chop off the top, though it seemed quite a waste. That's great, Mr. Willoughby cried with a glee. Now we can start to trim my tree. When the trimming was well underway, the top was placed on a silver tray. Baxter said, I know just who'd be delighted with this Christmas tree. So it was presented to Miss Adelaide, Mr. Willoughby's upstairs maid. Won't this tree be a pretty sight when I have trimmed it later tonight? But the top? Oh dear, I'm so afraid will have to be cut, sighed Miss Adelaide. And so with scissors sharp and long, she snipped off the top while she hummed a song. The top was set out the very next day in back of the house to be thrown away. That little tree top caught the eye of Tim, the gardener, passing by. He certainly was not about to see that little tree thrown out. He hurried home straight away to see what Mrs. Tim would say. Fa la la, surprise, surprise! His wife could not believe her eyes. But our house, she said, is so snug and small, I do not believe we need it all. And before Tim had a chance to shout, she cut off the top and threw it out. So everybody's having the same problem. The tree is too tall. Barnaby Bear was padding by. It almost hit him in the eye. Now, who would throw a tree away so very close to Christmas Day? I'll take it home. That's what I'll do. Look, Mama Bear, I've a present for you. Isn't it a pretty tree? Yawned Barnaby quite drowsily. But Little Bear, standing off far, cried out, That tree won't hold a star. Barnaby said, Let's cut a hunk off the bottom here at the trunk. But Mama Bear just shook her head and sliced the treetop off instead. Jolly by golly, Barnaby said with a kick. Mama, that surely is just the right trick. Let's trim it with bells and honey rings, some berries and tinsel and popcorn on strings. Mama said, Trim it just as you like. I've got to tidy up for the night. This top we won't need anymore. I'll put it just outside the door. Later on that frosty night, Frisky Fox came into sight. He spied the treetop, rubbed his chin, opened his sack, and stuffed the top in. He scampered home and jumped his gate. This Christmas present couldn't wait. It's even better than mincemeat pie, said Mrs. Fox with a happy sigh. Then the foxes saw that their Christmas prize was just a wee bit oversized. There, my dears, don't you worry. I'll fix this top now in a hurry. Benjamin Rabbit found it then just outside the fox's den. It seems, he thought, most certainly Santa left that for my family. Look, he cried, see the tree I found. With that he called his family round. Then there was a merry-making, rollicking, frolicking, carrot-shaking celebration around the tree. All were as happy as rabbits can be. Benjamin Rabbit, with his own hand, sliced a carrot and made a stand. Now let's see how this will look in our little chimney nook. But right away the children cried, look, it's leaning off to one side. It's too tall, that's all, said Mrs. Rabbit. And as though it were a summer carrot, she gave it a chop and threw away the top. Then Mistletoe Mouse just happened to see that tiny tip of a Christmas tree. He pulled it through the snow and ice, up some stairs, and fell down twice. At last he reached his cozy house. It's just the right size, said Mrs. Mouse. Then at the top, if you please, they put a star made out of cheese. Oh, wasn't it grand to have a tree exactly like Mr. Willoughby. Mr. Willoughby's fallen asleep, his tree's trimmed, but right next to it is the mouse family that got the very last part of the tree. So as I was listening to the book, I loved when the characters were so happy after they found just a little part of the Christmas tree. They found just what they needed. And so the theme that I took away from the story is, if you have more than you need, then we should share with others. And that's just a great thing to think about right here at Christmas. Christmas is a great time to stop and think about everything that we need to be thankful for, that we have, and if we're able to share a little extra with others who might have a need. So I'm done with the first book, and at this time Miss Lydia is going to show you a craft that you can make. It's a Christmas ornament bird feeder, and it's just a way to do something fun while you're at home. We will be using peanut butter in the craft, but if you have a peanut allergy, make sure that you use cake frosting instead. It will work just the same.
Miss Kara and I love outdoors. We hike finding waterfalls in nature, enjoying its beauty and its tranquility that it has to offer. During this time of the year, people often go out and get real Christmas trees or trees, and they bring them in and make their Christmas trees. So what we wanted to show you is a way to give back to nature instead of just always taking. So we're going to show you how to do a Christmas ornament bird feeder. You start with the pine cone and you tie either a piece of yarn or a thick piece of rope of some form around it. This one we have completed in the oats. We've already rolled it. This one we rolled in the rice and have completed. So we're going to do this one together. You can take a spatula, a spoon, or something that is sturdy, and you just spread the peanut butter all around the pine cone. It does get a little messy, but it's okay. We've got paper towels. Then you take the pine cone and you can roll it around. This is bird feed. You can use anything. You can use the oats, the rice, bird feed to roll it around in. Okay. And then as you get it ready, this is now ready to go and hang in the tree, which we will do shortly. Hang this out for the animals. And that is how you make a Christmas bird feeder.
Well, can you help me tie one?
Oh, that looks so good.
Yes, it does.
Do they leave some for the birds right here in case I'm on the ground? Well, I don't know.
You want to place them for the birds there?
You could, yes. That's a great idea.
In case some birds on the ground.
Here's that one.
They're gonna have them.
This looks like their own Christmas tree, doesn't it?
Yep. Good place to do it. We have 2 cats.
You have 2 cats?
Yep. We used to have 1,000. We didn't have 1,000. But there was kittens and one was a mom. There we go.
That looks
Then
great.
she ran away. Oh, there's a cat now. Here, baby. One's named Smokey, and one's named Shadow. Oh, it's running again.
Okay, so the last book that I want to read tonight for our Christmas story time is called The Tale of Three Trees. And Miss Lydia and I just wanted to keep that theme of Christmas and nature, and this is just another great story about trees. And so as we're listening to that, I also want you to think about theme again. What is the message or lesson that you as the reader can take from the story? The Tale of Three Trees. This is a traditional folk tale retold by Angela Elwell Hunt. Once upon a mountain top, 3 little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. So there's the 3 trees on top of the hill. The first little tree looked up at the stars, twinkling like diamonds above him. I want to hold treasure, he said. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. I want to be a strong sailing ship, he said. I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship in the world. The third little tree looked down into the valley below where busy men and women worked in a busy town. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all, she said. I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. Years passed, the rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. What do you think is going to happen? The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. Now I shall be made into a beautiful chest, thought the first tree. I shall hold wonderful treasure. The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It is perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. Now I shall sail mighty waters, thought the second tree. I shall be a strong ship, fit for kings. Then the third tree felt her heart sink. When the last woodcutter looked her way, she stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven. But the woodcutter never even looked up. Any kind of tree will do for me, he muttered, and with a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop. But the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chest. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard. But no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat. Too small and too weak to sail an ocean or even a river, he was taken to a little lake. Every day, he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumberyard. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said, and suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, "Peace." The storm stopped as quickly as it had begun, and suddenly the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday evening, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. And so when you think about the theme of this story, the three trees at the beginning, they all had dreams. And there's nothing wrong with having dreams and working really hard to reach those dreams in your life. But sometimes life doesn't go the way that we want it to. But usually there's a point where those things will turn out to be even better than we expected. So from me and Miss Lydia and Barberton School, we wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas! Happy New